My name is Niels Stenfeldt. I am the CEO of 9 Altitudes. I joined back in September, but already during the summer break I knew that I was about to join. So I began speaking with quite a lot of CEOs in the industry from manufacturing. Some in Denmark, some outside Denmark, and as you can hear on my funny accent, I am from Denmark. It's us who still is part of a kingdom, and there's something with Greenland. We're not going to talk about that, but that's me. What I want to talk about today is sustainability, but in a larger context. The problem I have with sustainability is that if I look at this particular definition, most people I know stop reading after line 2, maybe they read through to line 2.5. And suddenly sustainability as a theme became a conversation about how we preserve the planet, and only that. And I think a part of that led to a subset of discussions on sustainability that was not good for the business. Because while the purpose was really good, I'm a father to 2 sons. I really would love to make a planet that is in a better shape than the one my parents gave to me. But I also know that I just cannot do that if I only think that's the only goal, because it also somehow needs to be financed. So if you look at this particular definition I found here, it's a definition, and I maybe need to stand out here so everybody can see. It's a definition that also speaks to the last part, which is about economic viability. If we do not, as businesses, find a way to balance sustainability and make it an integral part of what we are doing, if we don't manage to do digitalization as an integral part of what we are doing, we will not become sustainable. We may do something that has a positive impact, but long-term, we as a business will not survive. I think that was one of the key messages I also took away after I spoke with multiple manufacturing businesses in the first month of my tenure. In fact, I'm trying to put it into 3 different buckets. So when I hear what are the challenges that manufacturers today are concerned about, what keeps them awake, it's clearly about the productivity. For those who have read some of the most recent studies about Europe, everybody talks about we as Europe needs to be more productive. Our productivity compared to the Americans and compared to China has been reducing. So let's be very clear, productivity is the primary battlefield. If you today run a manufacturing business, many businesses are experiencing that the blue-collar worker, those who work on the shop floor, are getting older and older, just as I am, and having potentially a little bit hard to adapt to AI. It's even hard to find the resources. It's not only hard to find the resources, but it's simply just hard to qualify them to use the new technologies that is required. Therefore, productivity is a battleground by itself. And everybody needs to find ways on how we can get the productivity up using AI. I think that's a common agreement. This is a very important theme. Another interesting thing is about supply chain. Because for a very long time, we all spoke about faster, cheaper, better, faster, cheaper, better, and that was it. And even if it was just cheaper, it was good. What changed? Well, first of all, there was a period where we had to run around with a face mask. There was a ship that decided to go on the other direction, if you can call it that, or make a U-turn in the middle of the Suez Canal. And then suddenly we realized that if we are not resilient, if we don't have the products that we have sourced to the Far East or wherever we have sourced it to, we have a problem. It might be 5% cheaper, but if it's not on stock when we need it, we are stuck. So we really need to think more and more about supply chain resilience, having alternative to get parts to our products, than just talking about price. Another key component. Thirdly, I think sustainability can become a competitive advantage. We know from research that around 71% of every consumer are willing to choose the product that is more sustainable from a planet preservation perspective than that is not, assuming it's the same price. Because it's only a relative small proportion that's actually willing to pay the premium, but it's a selection criteria. So if you are not on that wagon who are creating sustainable products and are telling a story that is transparent and honest, you will at one hand very likely be on the front page of a newspaper because of greenwashing and bad arguments. On the other hand, if you can tell a trustworthy story, you are actually preferred product for many consumers. But how do we get there? Well, for those of you who have similar age as I or even older, may remember that there was a time when we needed to go to somewhere. We would go into Google and we would create something that pretty much looked like this one. This is how to get from Brussels Airport to Paris. That's a relatively relevant route description to have at hand because they often go on strike, both in Belgium and as well in the French side. But the problem with this one is that here you get a classic standard operating procedure, similar to the one every manufacturing business have done for their process of producing something. But those who've ever tried to go out in the traffic with a piece of paper sitting on the lap of your wife, that's not necessarily fun either, but that's a different discussion. But at least trying to drive on this particular one description is a nightmare. Because after 3, 4, 5 minutes, you're lost. Either because your sense of direction just didn't get it, or simply because there was a road construction. Good news today is we have a GPS. What's the difference between a GPS and this standard operating procedure? A standard operating procedure don't know where you are. It only knows where you came from and where you're going to. The GPS changed that because now we are here, and every little piece of option is well described. We know everything. Every piece of the road is described. So wherever in the world we are today, more or less, we can be given the choices that are relevant for us. We can go right when we can go right, and we'll be told you should go straight out, or the nice lady or man in the GPS will tell us to make a U-turn when we made a mistake. Think of that as a manufacturing business. Today, most manufacturing businesses I speak with are still running the business like this. And then what happens? The customer who have an order to be delivered in 4 weeks calls sales and say, can I have it in 2? And then we all look in the SOP, and then we're having a challenge. Because we need to call sourcing, we need to check if the materials are there, we need to basically replan entire production, and if we are unlucky, we simply can't do it, but we first know 4 days later, and then the customer didn't really have a good experience. So the thought we have at 9 Altitudes is, how can we help every business not only create a standard operating process, that is how to get from A to B, but make a platform, digital platform. Jose Vicente mentioned the digital common thread, because the digital common thread is like the GPS. It's a GPS that will allow manufacturing business to actually go to wherever she wants to go at the place they are, based on the order book they have today, based on the materials that are available. That's the conversation we need to have. Therefore, remember that what happened on the GPS side now needs to happen on the manufacturing side. But it's not as trivial, because over all of this, we have this stream of having less waste. We're thinking about how can we really reuse as much as possible, and for those who who know what this is and don't know what it is, I can say so much that this is alumina rolls. The beauty with alumina rolls is that there's a lot of it. Many uses it in the production, which is great. Anyone who've ever tried to cut it will know that when you cut, you actually, you basically crack it. That means, take the example, you want to avoid wasting something that is a cutoff from your production. So what you do is you take that cutoff of the roll, put it up a temporary location so that your shop floor workers can go and pick it up at a later stage for a next line production where you need a smaller piece. The issue is just that if you just think that, oh, now we know we have this size material, let's go pick it up. That's a very different pick-up technique on a pre-cut, scratched alumina plate, because it will basically chop off your fingers. So if you think it's just about taking another piece of component from a waste area, then suddenly you have to think about safety and hazard. You need to make sure that that person who's picking it up has special gloves on, because otherwise the fingers will be cut off. Which means that the amount of complexity, the amount of information that needs to be in that GPS is actually quite large. And while it's large, it's also giving a complexity where only AI is probably the only thing that are capable of actually overlooking all the options. Because now it's not only about turning right or left, it's about applying additional work streams on top of each of the things. You saw it before. This is in another picture. This is the digital common thread. The way we at 9 Altitude sees the ideal infrastructure for manufacturing business. Wherever you are, the thing has to be tied together. That's the way to become sustainable. If we take the example, a customer calls and say, hey, I would like my product to arrive 2 weeks earlier than the order. Well, it will be someone likely up in sales taking up the call. The person needs to speak with somebody in manufacturing. They may need to have a linkage to procurement. It has to be connected with supply chain. It may need to be not only replanned, but it also has to potentially change how are the financing conditions on this particular deal. If this is not digital, if this has to be done manually, which it is for many businesses today, it's just going to be costly. That's why we have brought together the former Integral with the rest of the 9 Altitudes group, because we cover all these components. We have partnerships with Microsoft, we do shop floor automation with Tulip, we do the designs with PTC, so we're covering the entire stack so that we can create that GPS. Because that GPS is not a one-size-fit-everyone. There are individual differences. That's what we cover with our digital common thread. And why is it then important to be strong on the core? Where do you start? When we talk about sustainability, one thing is to create this sustainable platform that will make the business sustainable. But what about the first part of that definition I shared in the beginning, which was how do we do something that preserves the resources and the planet we all live on? Well, let's go back to engineering. In my opinion, the area in any manufacturing business today that is the most underinvested. Way too much money has gone into finance. Way too much money has been wasted on ERP systems that are just getting people marginally better to invoice other people. Way too few euros has gone in to find a way to structurally design a product based on parts that ties together with a PLM structure, so you have the entire data foundation to take informed decision. Because reality is that 80% of the entire environmental impact of any given product is taking at the time of design. Think about that, 80%. This particular component here is a component that is made with steel, and then you can see this green thing around it. It looks very superficial, like what is this? And I will move on, and then somebody, there you go. Now you see a slide starting. This is a bike, if you didn't notice it from the beginning. It's a bike, it's all the components that is in there. What you saw before, it's a specific components that for most bikes actually is created in steel. Steel as a component today is responsible for the roughly 14%, 1/4, of the world's CO2 emission comes from producing steel, just steel. Now this bike here had this particular component that looked like this, made in steel, maybe come from a part of the world where it's hard to get. As a designer, what am I doing? I'm actually creating some outer boundaries for this particular one, and then I'm asking Creo, a product that we are reselling from PTC, been doing it, this been possible in Creo for 6 or 5 generations at least. Then it actually begins recreating, regenerating. Today we'll call it AI, but let's be clear, it's just an algorithm that's basically rebuilding a structure. Where are the bearings? You see it being typed out here. How are the outer measures? What are the pressure it needs to handle? If it's my bike, obviously it needs to be able to take some weight. Same goes for Jose Vicente. Our bikes just have to be have to be able to consume that pressure that it will come when we're there. So you have to make sure that all these definitions are well built in, and that's what you do in a model. That could be anything in any product. You can take any component out and say, we don't want steel. We can actually go in here and say, actually, we want to have it built up in alumina. Not necessarily for the same roles, but something that comes out of alumina. Why? Less CO2, potentially stronger in the right structure, cheaper potentially if it's significantly smaller in weight, because there is a price difference. But hey, it could be that we could get it just around the corner. And that way, suddenly the 3 first themes I spoke about, which was the resilience and supply chain and the sustainability, suddenly those 2 things begin coming together. Because at one hand, we are asking the generative model to rebuild this in alumina, give us the shape it needs to have so it still will fit into the bike. And here it's done and dusted, or not dusted yet. Actually, I made a mistake with the bearing here. I do apologize for that, but that you can fix with drilling a hole or just redoing it again, and it will take another 5 minutes, and then you will actually have a full model. But the point is, here is the current one in steel. There it is. This is how it would look in alumina. It will fit in. Now, if you had to do this in any other tool, if you didn't have a tool like this would take a long time. How can you make sure it fits? You can now do this digitally, and this is the only way moving forward businesses can do Scope 3 decarbonization. Because if you, for every piece of this bike here, know what is the CO2 emission at the component level, at the part level, you can start with the parts that pollutes the most, that are the most costly, that are the hardest ones to get from the suppliers, that are at the biggest risk for not coming on time. And then suddenly you can actually cover all parts. It's not just about sustainability. It's not just about economic viability. It's not just about resilience in your supply chain. It's bringing all these 3 things together with the same infrastructure, with the same tools. And this is why I believe that when you go to any engineering business and any manufacturing business, engineering is the underinvested area. Because much more capabilities need to be built into this area here. Because Jose Vicente mentioned it, digital product passport is about to arrive. I hope you all are fully aware what the digital product passport will mean for your industry and for your business. But to put it simple, what GDPR were, that was something of roughly this size. If you felt that was a pain to go through in your business, imagine that anything related to digital product passport is roughly from the floor and up here. And I'm deliberately saying it with that magnitude of a difference, because the digital product passport is at a product level, and the products going to be covered are mattresses, furnitures, steel, wood, alumina, chemicals, which means everything we use on our body, also like any kind of makeup. Just to name some few, entire packaging, plastic, separate ones. For each of those, we have to be able, you have as a manufacturer, to be able to tell, how was this actually originated? Where does it come from? How has it been produced? How shall it be used correctly? And what are we going to do about it once it's over being used and it has to either go to waste or go into circularity? Why? Because we transparently want, we being Europe, want consumers to be able to take informed decision about their purchases. But not only based on a story, but based on real data. Now, these data is not about creating a report in finance. It's about making sure that the raw core data that engineers have been working on for years in the structural designs are correctly summarized. Because once that is the case, once you know the product designs, once you understand the implication from the production, how much CO2 emission did it invoke, then you can tell that entire story, make it digital available with a QR code, RFID chip, depending on what industry. And I forgot to mention tires are in there as well. So if you're a tire producer, guess what? That will also go there. If your thing have a battery with more than 2,000 hours of that in it, it also have a separate digital product passport just on the battery, just to make it complicated. And yeah, it sounds complicated. And yes, you can argue, oh, this is a new reporting tool. It's a new administrative burden. And yes, if you think of sustainability as reporting, it is. It is really costly. But if you think of sustainability as something that actually can drive your business to a more sustainable level, while preserving the planet we live on, while being less dependent on certain supplier in geopolitical uncertain times, well, maybe this is actually a pretty damn good idea. Because then we can both, I can say as someone who is responsible for a business who is implementing this across 4,000 businesses, I can actually, with a little bit of a smile on my mind, say, well, the reason why Daddy is not home is because he's trying to make this world a slightly better place. And then suddenly we are not just selling technology, we are actually helping Europe to take a lead and take the opportunity to say this is our moment where others are going in another direction. Imagine if we do it that way. I think that's worthwhile a thought. But it all starts here. If you think you can do sustainability reporting in your finance department, you got it wrong, because then it's going to be a cost. If you think the sustainability is something that just can be done in isolation by a sustainability manager that is not part of the core business, you're wrong. If you start looking at how do I become more productive, how do I get AI into this equation, how do I break down all my informations into different parts that AI can help me bring together and in common infrastructure can bring together through digitalization, then you can talk about supply chain resilience. Because then you can take every single part and figure out, am I dependent on something? And I deliberately put supply chain resilience as the first ring outside the core. Because right now, the number one theme in our mind is, are we going to go to war? I don't think so. But it is high on our agenda. We are concerned about the geopolitical situation What about tariffs? 25% extra on all cars produced in Europe if they're being imported into the US was announced this night. It will have impacts. Therefore, supply chain resilience, being able to look at vendors, parts, dependencies, costs, risks, has to be a key part of any motion in any manufacturing business. But then around all that comes sustainability. And the sustainability is not just about preserving our planet. It's not just about making sure that the business can survive, but it's making the combination of all of it. That's how I would like us all to think about sustainability in the future. So as a closing, for me, sustainability is not about CSRD. I could get you 800 other acronyms. I'm not. Sustainability is not about reporting. It's not about greenwashing. It's not about storytelling. It's about this. Oh, sorry for this side of the audience. It's about this. It's about building these sustainable business processes. Because if we do that, we have all chances to get it right and be proud getting home. But it starts with everyone in here going home to your businesses and say, guys, we need to invest more in engineering because this is where the foundation for a better future sits. That was my conclusion for today. Thank you very much for listening.